The idea of good is subjective. It can mean one thing to one person and another to somebody else. What constitutes a good exhibit may be seen as bad to someone else. Oftentimes, what I like to bring attention to is the diaspora between two different communities, both the creative sandbox players and the more operational challenge and franchise mode players. Now, please don't think I'm calling the operational franchise players not creative, yeah. In fact, I think it takes a lot of creativity to programmatically breed animals in this game, and I sure as heck can't do it myself. I mean, these guys are gifted. But the true split between the two comes from very different angles. One of the aspects I actually want to look into regarding this is animal welfare, and how it has a little bit of a hindrance on gameplay. And as we know, Planet Zoo and the Frontier have consulted various zoos from around the world in order to achieve sort of the best ideal zoo simulator possible, which to give animals the best living conditions possible. I really do applaud the team for taking this approach as opposed to zoo sims from the past, be it Zoo Tycoon or Wildlife Park Tycoon, but there are still some differences, and there are some issues I still have with this system when you play like franchise or challenge mode. In essence, it really does hinder the creativity in the game, which, the game is meant to flex your creative muscles for, a variety of reasons. And today, I really just wanted to sit down with you guys and go through all of these and hoping to understand some of the minor flaws I have with the game. And, I understand that they won't really get addressed within this version of Planet Zoo, but I hope that this will kind of give a little bit more hindsight for a future installment of the game, whenever that may come, be it Planet Zoo 2 or Planet Aquarium. Now, one of the main hindrances I see to exhibit design and creativity is animal welfare, and that's going to be the main thing I talk about today. Of course, it makes sense in a game like this. You design exhibits for the animals you want to care for, but within the realm of creativity, utilizing pieces to a greater and more unconventional extent, and generally making exhibits look better, the game will punish you for taking that same step out of the box to do something a lot more out of the ordinary, but the thing you give up in animal welfare is sort of a good-looking exhibit in the end. It's an incredible balancing act for, a lot of different things, and we're going to get into those. First of all, being foliage. Now, Frontier, I can admit you guys absolutely knocked it out of the park with the foliage additions in Planet Zoo compared to Planet Coaster. And while I do appreciate a lot of the things that Planet Coaster did have, I mean, hey, I'm going to talk about those palm trees in Planet Coaster. You guys had such amazing foliage in there that we don't even have in this game. So, hey, if you guys are looking for an easy port, just bring those over to Planet Zoo. That's what I'm saying over here. But Planet Zoo does give you the ability to make such beautiful landscapes that resemble real life in some cases. Take, for example, this screenshot from Romanopolis, or, I'm gonna throw his name across the screen because I have no clue on how to pronounce it. Now, you would think that this is a real picture from, this beautiful temperate waterscape, but you're able to do this in Planet Zoo. And this is something that, it's really amazing that you can have with such limited foliage palettes and stuff like that. But each animal has specific foliage requirements, and that's something I have a little bit of an issue with. Some prefer foliage from a specific continent, from a specific biome, and heck, some animals don't even like foliage at all. I mean, this can prove to be an issue if you're trying to have a bit more of a realistic kind of a planted zoo. If you're designing habitats with maybe a bush in the corner and just sand all about, kind of like a real exhibit would have, your animals might have an issue with it. I mean, this is going to be a little bit of a problem to me, because you might even have examples where you're making a nice temperate zoo, and you throw in a camel in a realistic looking exhibit, and it doesn't like the birch tree in the corner. And, that's going to be something we get into in just a little bit. But I don't like this, alright? I don't like this. I never really did like this system. This was a system implemented in Zoo Tycoon 1. And back in Zoo Tycoon 1, we had the same system where only specific animals like specific foliage, and it really hindered making good-looking exhibits and making concise-looking exhibits. In Zoo Tycoon 2, they did away with that whole system. They only had it focus on, I would say just the biome paint And that was it. That was a really good system to have because you could mix and match foliage from different eras. Not different eras. Well, I guess technically with that because extinct animals, but you could mix and match foliage from different biomes and stuff, and the animals would still be happy. But we took the step in the wrong direction, again, with Planet Zoo, and we have a lot more restrictive palettes when it comes to exhibit design, and that's something I really don't like. They brought back this little foliage meter, if it were, and it just doesn't really help the creative player at all. And, you know, another thing I have the problem with when it comes to Planet Zoo is the space limits for a lot of animals. And, you know, it's a good thing that Planet Zoo did consult AZA practices for space limits, as well as animal standards and stuff like that, like hard shelter and stuff. It does take into account like a lot of the necessary requirements, but, you know, I'm gonna be completely honest, it doesn't really work in a system where if you place down a fallen tree, take for example the broken logs, I'm gonna show a picture of it in just a minute, it doesn't really work for that specific instance. And it takes out such a huge chunk of like the land in the game that it just doesn't work. Like, I'm not a big fan of it. And you know, I do appreciate them trying to give us a realistic zoo sim, but it doesn't work if your game is gonna, you know, kind of work against you when you try and do realistic habitats for a realistic requirement. And you know what? Let's actually do a little experiment. So here I have two exhibits for Bactrian camels, and if I could get centered over here, we're gonna look at them. On the left, we have one that is kind of designed to be Frontier's requirements for the camel. I tried my best to make sure that everything was matching up for this specific animal. And on the right, I have one that is a lot more freeform, something that is a lot more creative and a lot more realistic. Now, if we check out the requirements for a camel on the left, the Frontier camel, we can see that, you know, a lot of his needs are being met. The only things that are kind of like bad are things like cleanliness, social group, and meal quantity, and those really aren't important for now. But yeah, we can see that everything else is matched up, but we have nothing in here. Like, that's the biggest qualm that I have with this. This is a boring looking habitat. Meanwhile, we do have everything matching up for it. He is happy. We just about made the space requirements, which is kind of surprising for an animal this small in a habitat this big. But look how, I don't know, it's just kind of a boring exhibit. Meanwhile, if we look over here, we actually have a good looking exhibit, I would say so myself. And we have some realistic elements that we would see in real zoos. So take for example, these fallen trees. Like, this is something you would see in real life. You would see fallen trees kind of like break up the habitat a little bit. You would also see a lot of this happen. This would prevent animals from going into foliage and stuff and trampling it. It basically prevents them from making the habitat look bad again, because we do know that animals tend to make habitats look bad. But if we look at the welfare on this guy, everything is just down the toilet over here. If we look at terrain, we see that his navigation is not the best, and we can see how much like doing good decoration kind of implements itself to kind of work against the player. And I don't know, I'm just not a fan of it. The way that habitat space is calculated is not good, especially when you're trying to do realistic habitats like, you know, implementing these fallen logs and stuff. Granted, you could just say, don't put the fallen logs there, but I want to have a good habitat. I'm making a zoo, and the first thing I want to do is make a good looking habitat for said zoo. Another instance would be the terrain distribution. This is like a good looking habitat, I would say. This is a good looking biome. And the way that the camel likes his habitat, it's kind of boring. You see, this one over here is just sand and rock. It is nothing. This one, at least you have a little bit more grass, at least you have a little bit more soil. You're able to work with the habitat a lot more. And I don't know, I just prefer it a lot like this. And to boot, we also have Foliage. Now, Foliage, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, alright? Now, Foliage, you have a lot of room to place foliage in here, but the animal only prefers so much foliage in its habitat, and that's something that I really have a qualm with. Because once you start to place foliage that isn't from the specific region, be it, let's just say, you're making a European zoo, and you implement European foliage in your animal's habitat. I can understand why animals from, let's just say, China wouldn't appreciate European foliage. But it's something that happens in real life, and animals in accredited AZA facilities actually have foliage not from their native region inside of their habitat. And that's something that I really wish Planet Zoo would at least have a little bit of leeway with. And, you know, we could get rid of this all, but you know what? I don't want to, because it actually looks good. Now, we're going to address something else too, and some people are going to be like, hey Leaf, foliage doesn't really have that much of a kind of like a hindrance on animal welfare. And that's like, okay, I'm gonna look at this over here. We have this in the red over here, and we have a bunch of things in the red over here. So why isn't this plants in the red? I don't get it. And just seeing this, you go into your animal tab, it's kind of like your keeper facts or whatever, I guess, and you see everything in the red. The player is going to instinctually, make it habitable for the animal itself. And by doing that, you need to take away everything in here. And by doing that, the habitat looks a lot less lush, and it looks a lot more boring. And, you know, you could just be like, oh, but it's only a couple percentages off. Like, why do you care that much? Well, I really do, because it's good having a nice looking habitat. And I don't know, I just would prefer to have this and have the animal appreciate all like the foliage that I have in there, but that's neither here nor there. And I don't know, it's just something that I would like to see in the game a little bit more. I would at least like to see the animals be a lot more, I don't know, have a lot more leeway with their habitat. I don't know, it's just something that I feel. But, you know, it's actually really interesting to see all these needs start to pop up and seeing like what level of realism gets implemented and what isn't. For example, like we have bull elephants that are often kept in separate enclosures as females in protection of each other, but in Planet Zoo these gender ratios are handled and accounted for, but it's not like a key feature. You don't need to separate your bull elephants from your female elephants in every single zoo that you make, and you need to put them together just to breed, and then you take them out again. It just doesn't work that way in the game, and that's something that I like. You know, I'm happy about that. It gives a lot more leeway to the player. It allows them to do a lot more creative habitats. But it's just this picking and choosing that I don't get for Planet Zoo and for Frontier. I just don't understand what makes it so that these gender separations are something that, you know, it's not allowed, well, it's not enforced in Planet Zoo, but specific foliage and specific biome requirements are. It's something that's just really, really weird to me, and I don't really appreciate it, I guess. I don't know, it's just something that, you know, I was thinking, but hey. But I don't know. I built a lot of good things in Planet Zoo, and it's probably one of the best games out there for creativity. I'm able to build a lot of awesome things in sandbox mode, and that's something I really do appreciate. I build exhibits, I build entire zoos. Heck, sometimes I don't even make zoos in Planet Zoo, and that's something that's really awesome. But it's so weird seeing how I build compared to how a franchise or a challenge player builds. You don't get that same enjoyment out of creativity when you're playing sandbox, you know? Well, when you're playing franchise or challenge mode. You're a lot more restricted, and you know, you get penalized for it. It all comes down to penalization. If you make a good looking habitat like this, and hopefully I have it running up here like as it is, but your animal welfare is down the toilet. It's just not good, and that's something I really don't appreciate, because there are so many aspects for creativity for Planet Zoo that a lot of players can take, but the game punishes you for taking those creative liberties. And no, I just really don't like it. But I don't know, you have a whole niche of players in franchise mode that aren't able to build the same things that us sandbox players aren't able to build, and that's really unfair. And you know, this whole argument kind of leads me to understand this whole animal pack like business a lot more, because these franchise players, they don't have the time to focus on piece count. They don't have the time to focus on making, you know, their zoos look good. They focus on the animals, and that's it. And like, you know, sometimes they may use like a few like blueprints and stuff like that, but when it comes down to it, the animals are the key aspect in those modes. instead of like a mix of both habitat and animals. And I don't know. I just understand that argument a lot better for animal packs. And, you know, I understand you guys and I hear you. But, you know, I think I should kind of end it right here because, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of done with this little ramble. But I hope you guys understand, like, where I'm coming from this. I really wish Planet Zoo would actually focus on a lot more bit of creativity for these more technical modes. I mean, you don't really play franchise for building the most freeform zoos, but I wish it wouldn't punish you for building good-looking exhibits, and, you know, you're restricted building a little bit more boring exhibits. But I don't know, if you're from Frontier and you watched this far, thank you for watching. And, you know, I know Leaf is a little bit of a problem child for Frontier, but I really do hope you guys were able to understand where I was coming from and kind of listen as to what I had to say. I know it's a little bit different when it comes to like what you guys are hoping for from critique, but I hope this guy, I just hope it went to some use for you guys. And if you watched this whole video, I really do appreciate you guys. I appreciate you sticking around. This is a little bit of a Leaf rant, but I know you guys appreciate those from time to time. It's quite a long video. Oh my god, it was like 60 minutes of ranting. Alright, awesome. So I'm going to take it there, guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.